Welcome, everyone, to our third installment of Meet the Curator. My name is Marilee Mostov. I am the Chief Engagement Officer here at the museum, and I am thrilled to be here today because I get to spend an hour with you learning more about our kind of newish but very delightful Chief Curator, David Stark. Yay! And today we're going to start out by taking a trip, an art journey with David Stark. He's going to share some of his ideas about art and what he's done in the past. And then we're going to relax a little and have a little question and answer period and learn a little bit more about David. Okay? Let's get started.
Well, thanks, Marilee, for that nice introduction. And my thanks to everybody in the room and people in the museum in Columbus who've been so welcoming since I actually returned to Columbus after being away for many years. And I'll explain that in a minute. I was going to talk for the first half hour, approximately, about three things, basically. I was going to tell you a little bit about my story, how I came to where I am now. I'm going to talk about the future reinstallation of the permanent collection in the older building. I guess we could call it the 1931 building, or we're supposed to call it the Ross building. And I'll end up with something that was mentioned in the publicity about my topic, or what I was going to talk about, a little bit about the difference between modern versus contemporary art, what postmodern means in relationship to contemporary, modern, etc. So let's plunge right in. I'll begin with my years in grad school right here in Columbus at Ohio State. I earned my PhD in art history at Ohio State, grew up in Cleveland, went to Oberlin College, and I'm very honored to have one of my former professors in the audience who helped guide my research on a topic that took me back to the 19th century in time and took me to Belgium to research a 19th century painter, two of whose works you see on the screen. Charles de Groux is his name. He was a social realist painter. He painted the problems and issues and the different levels of rural and urban society in his time. And I had a wonderful time doing research far from Columbus for a number of months in 1978. And following my the completion of my dissertation, I started my professional journey. And very few people in America have heard of Charles de Groux, but he's often mentioned in relationship to a very important and well-known artist that he inspired, Vincent van Gogh. And this particular work by de Groux, of peasants praying before a meal, painted in a very austere way, was inspirational to Vincent van Gogh. And I didn't make that up, because Vincent van Gogh's letters mention this painter, Charles de Groux, a lot. He's mentioned more than any other contemporary artist, with one exception, in Van Gogh's letters. So I had a wonderful time during the early part of my career as an art historian, and that was followed by many years as an art museum educator. Most recently, just before I came to the Art Institute, well, not just before, 21 years before I came to the Art Institute, I started, before coming to the Columbus Museum, I'm sorry, I started at the Art Institute of Chicago in the Department of Museum Education. And I just show you a couple slides of the new wing of that museum that opened in 2009, because I feel like I'm reliving that experience of working in a museum where a modern wing, an extension, an enlargement of space is about to open. And my experience at the Art Institute was that it was like working in a new museum, because there are all these new spaces. There's so much more space to exhibit art that's in the permanent collection and for special exhibitions. So I'm prepared, and I'm sure you all are, for a very exciting time beginning in October. So the great thing about being an educator at the Art Institute at the time of the modern wing thing opening was that so much space on the ground floor was devoted to museum education. And you see some of the classroom spaces and the ground plan for so many studio and classroom spaces, smart classrooms with projectors and smart boards and a bank of laptop computers for teens and young people. And I spent many of my years at the Art Institute supervising adult programs. And there were sketch classes for members in the galleries. I was in charge of coordinating audio tours with a company that we worked with called Acoustiguide. And one of my last projects was overseeing the translation of the audio tour into the fourth foreign language after Spanish, French, the third foreign language after Spanish, French, and Chinese. But there were two versions of Chinese. I learned more than I thought I would, Mandarin and traditional Chinese. So we had over 500 stops with our audio tours. And I was really interested in technology, educational technology, and helped in the early years of the internet populate the website with not only images but interpretive information about works of art from all areas of the collection. Some of the programs that I oversaw are still online at the Art Institute website, talking about the arts in different areas with lesson plans for teachers, activities for families. And I also thought it was important to get information about exhibitions online. So that was another kind of a project that occupied my energy. And I thought it was important, even though we bought computers for use of teenagers and young people, I thought it was really important to introduce and help adult audiences with uses of digital technology, especially with the expansion of the website just within the last 6 or maybe 10 years with the explosion of social media. And museums, in the Columbus Museum has a Twitter page, a Flickr page, a YouTube page, and so on and so forth. And so just navigating your museum's website, sometimes it's great to have a helping hand to discover all the potential for not only learning about the museum's collections and art and exhibitions, but communicating with other people that are interested and wish to be engaged with the museum and with each other. And I moonlit. I had an evening, a night job in Chicago. On Monday nights, I taught at Columbia College, Chicago, down the street from the museum, which has a very strong photography department, fashion design, a liberal arts college, but with a special emphasis on the fine arts. And I like to experiment with technology as I was teaching my art history classes. So, for example, I had students take cell phone snapshots and text them to me to illustrate various terms that were introduced in the course, and then posting these on a course Facebook page so that students could see what the other students were doing, and give students a chance to respond to various open-ended questions that I posed online. And one of the great things I loved about working at the Art Institute was foreign travel and the opportunity that I had to lecture on trips abroad. And I just recently, my very last obligation to the Art Institute took place last week when I spent 7 days in Berlin lecturing to museum members from the Art Institute that traveled to this incredible German city that is so, it contains such an incredible mix of traditional and postmodern architecture, sometimes in the same building. For example, the Norman Foster dome on the 19th century Reichstag building. And this is kind of a transition, and then something else that impressed me, this is the transition to my comments about the reinstallation here at the Columbus Museum, is the incredibly large attendance for an exhibition, primarily of permanent collection works of the Berlin museums. And so exciting after the reunification that East German and West German collections that had been split up during the Cold War, and part of one collection would be in East Berlin, part in West, they've been reunited and reunified, and that's a process that continues. And the exhibition currently, that's more or less a blockbuster in Berlin, the short title is Im Ex, which means Impressionism and Expressionism. And it's an exhibition that people are lining up for and patiently waiting to view the representative works of the Impressionist movement, and mostly German Impressionists. We're so familiar with the Monet or Renoir and French Impressionism, but German Impressionists like Max Liebermann, Lovis Corinth, and looking at them in relationship to Expressionists, German Expressionists, this radical early 20th century movement preceding and following World War I that involved a radical distortion of shape, space, and color, as this banner indicates. And it was really interesting to see the relationships that the curators drew between the kinds of subjects that Impressionists and Expressionists painted. You usually don't think of those two movements together, but they were both very radical and avant-garde in Germany. And the juxtaposition of works from these two different schools, late 19th and early 20th century, was very illuminating. So, in the spirit of mixing it up a little bit and not installing the galleries the way that they necessarily were before, we're in the process of reinstalling our permanent collection works. Works that I'm sure you're familiar with, that you've seen in different parts of the museum, works in combination with different works hanging side by side in different ways through the years. And the reinstallation began in June. Actually, there's part of it, as I'll explain, that even began well before I started here, that was put together by my great predecessor, Dominique Vasseur, the former chief curator. But the game plan, what we're doing now, is in a relatively speaking clockwise direction, reinstalling gallery by gallery, and excuse the chicken scrawl on this printed diagram. And I'll explain as we go through gallery by gallery what the concept is in representing the collection of the museum. So if we start with Gallery 1, there's a special exhibition put together by our great curator, who I think I saw in the audience, Carol Genshaft, are you here? And Fabrics of Survival, that has to do with embroidery done by a Holocaust survivor. And this will continue to consist of special exhibitions on various topics, some drawn from our permanent collection, some not. And if you go from that gallery to gallery number 2, you'll see an installation that was just completed a couple weeks ago of American works of art, and we're calling it American Stories. So the Gallery 1, Gallery 2, and this includes American works from start to finish, from our earliest 19th century American works, like this Thomas Cole painting, the Cascatelli, showing this beautiful a series of waterfalls in Italy, and as far forward as the 20th century, and even further into the 20th century, with one of the stars of the collection, The Soda Jerk by Norman Rockwell. And moving on to Gallery 3, this is going to be the connector gallery. There'll be a passageway from the new wing to the gallery, in which we're tentatively calling Collection Highlights. Our director, Nanette Mesa-Jones, calls it the Crowing Gallery, the gallery where we can crow about the really strong areas, the strengths of the collection. And we'll have various walls devoted to the master artists whose works are very well represented in the museum. For example, no secret that the Columbus Museum has the largest collection of works by George Bellows of any museum. And there'll be a wall devoted to paintings, part of a wall devoted to his works on paper, another wall devoted to the works of Charles Demuth, a wall devoted to Elijah Pierce, and a wall devoted to photographs as well. Great strengths of the collection: folk art, photographs, and these early American modern masters. And Gallery 4, The Social Mirror, containing works connected with social realism, artists looking out at society and reflecting issues and problems, and sometimes celebrations of society. These come mainly from the Schiller collection. It's a great collection of paintings and works on paper that was acquired from a private collection from suburban Chicago in 2005. So there'll be the Social Mirror, followed by galleries devoted to photography. And our photography curator, Drew Sawyer, is in the audience, and I don't know if this is one of the works that he'll include in that gallery, but just one example of our strong photography collection. And the gallery number 6, devoted to folk art, so continuing in this clockwise direction. And a gallery that on the diagram here is called Impressionism. It's better to call it inner life. So as opposed to social realism, where the works are devoted to views of society and looking at objective reality, inner life is about what goes through the artist's minds and what represents their emotions, what they don't see, but what they feel, that which is subjective rather than objective. So something like Edward Hopper's Morning Sun shows a very introspective figure, and we can imagine what, and a lot of, there's more attention placed on the introspection and the thoughts and the mood of the figure than any specifics about where she is in time or place. And so this can include surrealism, magic realism, American scene painting, or expressionism, which is all about pictorial distortion as a way of forcefully expressing inner emotions. And then the final galleries having to do with one of the glories of the Columbus Museum's collection, the early American modernist works by painters like Arthur G. Dove, very boldly abstract, and the collection of Impressionist works, finishing up with the age of Impressionism that would contain both Impressionist works like this masterpiece by Monet and post-Impressionist works. Many of these 19th century masterpieces come from the Sirac collection, a great private collection, former private collection in Columbus. And in the corridors, we didn't forget the passageways as you go from gallery to gallery and surrounding Derby Court. The corridors will be filled with, we're calling it tentatively, faces of the Columbus Museum of Art. Those works from all periods. I could have included some Madonnas from the Renaissance, old masters, that are images showing faces of individuals in a wide range of styles. And then finally, the Old Masters Gallery that I didn't talk about or show examples from, containing works from the Renaissance to the the late 18th century that rounds out the reinstallation. So the Old Masters, the former Schumacher collection, got a head start with the reinstallation, and we're continuing on. Now, I want to give you just say a few words about an exhibition coming up that's opening at the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia in February of 2016, and will be here on June 10th, the opening day of the Columbus Arts Festival 2016, a really special exhibition of works by Picasso from a particular period in his career. We're titling it Picasso, Transformation, Change in the Great War. What was happening in Picasso's art during World War I? He didn't fight in the war. He was a Spaniard living in France. He was exempt from military service, but his art underwent profound transformation, and that had to do with the introduction of representational, traditional, classical subjects and representational or classical style. That was a radical departure from the pictorial distortions, the flattening of space, the dissection of objects and rearrangement on a picture surface of the Cubism. But these two styles coexisted at the same time, and he would go back and forth in the same year, in the same month, painting subjects that were stylistically so radically different. So that's what this exhibition explores, and it will consist of loans from museums, both American and European, private collections, as well as public institutions. And it should be a really exciting moment for the museum about a year after the opening of the new wing. And so finally, as advertised, I said that, or the summary of what I was going to talk about included something about the distinction between modern and contemporary art. And it's a fact that the reinstallation of the Ross building, the 1931 older building that we're in, will more or less stop at, but won't be restricted to modern art, or art that often we say ends with World War II, the end of World War II. It's traditional to say that contemporary art, and for all intents and purposes, that's more or less the way we're thinking about much of what will be exhibited in the new wing, that it will be contemporary art from the period that begins with abstract expressionism. And, oh boy, I have a typo, sorry about that. Expressionism, that it represents a new phase in the history of art, because it's the first time that American art is leading the world in the new progressive art movement that sweeps through Europe, coming from America instead of in the opposite direction. And as the post-war period progressed, movements like pop art and minimalism emerged, which have a certain characteristics. And forgive me for showing a few works that aren't in the Columbus Museum's collection, but this is from the Art Institute, and by Joseph Stella, a minimalist, and a pop art work by Roy Lichtenstein that was exhibited in a Lichtenstein exhibition at the Art Institute a few years ago. And these two images show a stylistic similarity, even though one is totally abstract. It doesn't represent anything. It's just color, space, and shape. And this image looks like it represents a woman on a telephone, but it's really a picture of a page from a comic book. It's a picture of a picture. And if you look closely and think about both images, there's a lot of repetition. They're both impersonal in terms of the way that the works are constructed. Even the technique is impersonal. Stella used masking tape to make sure his lines were straight. And Lichtenstein applied his color, his little dots with which the flesh tones consist with a stencil. And there's something industrial and mechanical and repetitious about these works, and they represent a facet of post-war America that was being so heavily industrialized, with mass-produced objects coming off assembly lines and mass communication, replicating images at an alarming rate. Contemporary art often, as I said, thought of as art from 45 to the present, but there's a certain certain school of thought that considers, well, modernism doesn't end with World War II, but it goes into a late phase, let's say a late modern phase. And then something that's referred to as postmodernism begins in the 1970s. And one of the signature movements that's connected with this contemporary movement that's called postmodernism is called neo-expressionism, that's very different in many ways from minimalism or pop art. And an example I show here from '81 by Rainer Fetting, a German expressionist, has to do with a reliance on historical sources. So the postmodern sensibility isn't afraid to look back at history. There's a turning away from this notion of looking towards the future, denying the past, presenting art in an impersonal way, and reintroducing emotion and passion in art. And there's a direct reference in neo-expressionism to the original German expressionist movement that I talked about in reference to this exhibition in Berlin. Sorry, I think I've got expressionism and German art on the brain, but it's a very typical way to introduce postmodernism by looking at the neo-expressionist movement. And the term postmodernism was actually introduced in conjunction with architecture when the notion of what's called the international style, that again is rooted in Germany before World War I with a reform school of architecture and design called the Bauhaus, how that during and after the war spread to America in the hands of a master teacher of the Bauhaus, Mies van der Rohe. So the international style that represents and is seen in skyscrapers of the post-war period that are essentially glass and concrete and steel boxes, with the notion that there's no decoration, ornamentation, that form follows function, or famously Mies van der Rohe saying less is more. We have a reaction to that beginning in the late 70s and 80s. For example, Michael Graves in a Portland building, which like neo-expressionism makes references to the past. This is all about the future, the modern age, embracing industrialism. This looks back to the past with columns. It introduces color instead of simply functional gray and black. And the famous saying by Robert Venturi, less is a bore. And sometimes this aesthetic is called maximalism as opposed to the more minimalist look of the international style. And so this particular office building in Portland, Oregon is sometimes compared to a wedding cake or a giant jukebox. There are references to the Art Deco style, to Egyptian art, and it's fun, it's colorful, it's decorative, and a very different sensibility emerges. And then coming back to the Columbus Museum, even a minimalist like Frank Stella changes his style so that by 1986, instead of this impersonal, flat, precise mechanical style, he's scribbling on what's essentially a relief panel that is not flat but projects from the canvas, has a multitude of shapes colliding in different angles in different directions, and a representation, it's still abstract, and then a representational painter like Mark Tansey with water lilies, these are both in our permanent collection, is not using commercial imagery or the modern world, but rather looking back to the past at Claude Monet and his water lily paintings that are a direct source of inspiration and are referred to explicitly in the title. Now for something a little or completely different that you may well not have seen before in a museum presentation and may never see again.
Thank you, David. That was really fascinating.
You're welcome. Thanks. Thanks very much. Thanks.
And my job, what I've been asked to do now, is to kind of ask you some questions. I have a list of questions so that we can all learn a little bit more about you, David Stark.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah. And you mentioned to me that you particularly like bicycling.
I love cycling. Yeah, when I can't actually ride outside, I spin inside, with a group of people.
What a better way to meet David Stark than to take a bike ride?
Sounds good to me.
Let's do it.
I haven't had much time to exercise during the last week, so this sounds really good.
It'll be fun. We'll be right back. So thank you, everyone, for coming on our bike ride today here. So for a warm-up, let's do a quick review of your career path. So I know you started in Ohio. You were raised in Cleveland.
Correct.
We won't talk about the basketball game last night. I noticed you're not wearing a Cavaliers shirt. And then
Correct.
you studied at Oberlin.
Yep.
And got your PhD in the history of art from The Ohio State University.
I did. Yep.
Terrific. But then you left Ohio and you moved to Minnesota.
I got my PhD, and my first job was teaching at the University of Minnesota Morris in the southwest corner of the state. It was called a cognate campus to the major campus of the University of Minnesota. So yeah, I taught there for a year, replacing somebody on sabbatical leave.
And then you went on to Minneapolis and somewhere north.
Yeah, I wrote a catalog of the permanent collection of the University of Minnesota Museum in Duluth. And the time that I spent working on that, I lived in Minneapolis because it was easier to do research there, but I would sometimes go up and spend some days and nights in Duluth, so I got a good look, of course, at the paintings, but that included some European travel. It was a grant-funded project.
Oh, nice. And then from Minnesota, you crossed the country and went to New York.
I did. I didn't go to New York City, but Central New York, Utica, New York, and that's close to Syracuse. And there's a little museum called the Munson Williams Proctor Institute, or the Munstitute, and as locals called it. And it consisted of a modern museum designed by Philip Johnson in the international style, and a historic house that I think to the locals looked like the Munster House, you know, that TV series, The Haunted House. But yeah, it was a great experience for a couple of years, and that was my first museum education job in Utica.
Nice.
Yeah.
But you left Utica and you went to the glamorous Rhode Island.
Providence, Rhode Island. The Rhode Island School of Design, which has a great museum that contains the first American wing of any museum, a great collection of colonial furniture. Rhode Island was one of the colonial furniture making centers, along with Philadelphia and Boston. And I had a wonderful 10 years in Providence, Rhode Island, working as the curator of education.
And from there, you moved on to Chicago.
Right, yeah, where I stayed, as I think I said in the beginning of my talk, for 21 years, and I had various positions within a very large education department, and I had an incredible time both in Chicago and during my 21 years there. I think I lectured, including the Berlin trip, on 11 or 12 international trips. I've lost count of how many.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were mostly European, Scandinavia, Eastern Europe, Scotland, Belgium, Italy, Holland, France. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You are a globetrotter. Maybe you could try doing that on your bike next time. But we're lucky because now you landed here, back at your roots in Columbus at the Columbus Museum of Art.
Yeah. And
we're so happy and thrilled to have you because you can see he's really fun. Okay, do you feel warmed up now?
Yeah, I'm pretty warmed up.
Okay, now I'm a little nervous about saying this, but when we were having lunch, you were trying. I've never anyone taken a spinning class before. Okay.
Yeah, lots of people. We should have music. We need music.
We need music. You told me in spinning class there's something called the jump.
Oh yeah. Sure.
What's the jump?
That's where you cycle a little bit and then you get up.
It might be hard.
You have to increase the resistance. Let's see if I. Yeah.
Okay, well, our next section of questions,
1, 2, 3, 4,
it's a lightning.
Up, 2, 3, 4, down, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
I'm going to ask you about a dozen quick questions, multiple choice. There's just 2 answers. It's like SATs. Choose the best answer.
Okay.
Okay, this is to learn more about you in a quick way. David Stark, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Beer or wine?
Wine.
Jeans or khakis?
Jeans.
Jazz or pop?
Pop.
Mariah Carey or Alanis Morissette?
Alanis.
Okay, now, based on your PowerPoint, I just got to ask, modern or postmodern?
Kind of postmodern.
Okay. Morning person or evening person?
Evening.
Okay. So now we know. Aisle or window seat?
Gotta be aisle. My long legs. I got banged up by the carts during my trip back from Berlin 3 times. Yeah.
Yeah. I figured you traveled a lot. I had to ask that question. Okay, it's Thanksgiving, David. Pumpkin or pecan?
Pumpkin.
Pumpkin. You're going out to dinner, David. What will it be, Chinese or Indian?
Indian.
Eat in or take out?
Eat in.
Okay. You can invite just one dinner guest. Who will it be, Monet or Matisse?
Oh, I'm glad you gave me a choice. Monet.
Bellows or Warhol?
Warhol.
Oprah or Ellen?
Oprah.
Okay. You could ask questions about his answers later. Okay, we know you've done a lot of traveling.
Yep.
You must have favorite cities, so here you go. Stockholm or Amsterdam?
Oh, impossible to choose. It's a draw.
Oh, I forgot to tell you the rules. That reminds me.
Okay.
You get 2 draws and you ring the bell if you don't want. If you want to pass. You see the bell there? It was my kid. Okay,
right.
I forgot the rules.
Okay.
Yeah, that's 1. You only get 1 left.
All right.
Okay, London or Paris?
Paris.
New York or LA?
LA.
All right.
I don't care. I like movies.
Hey,
I like Hollywood.
if you take him out to lunch and buy him pumpkin pie, you can ask questions later, okay?
LA County Museum is a great museum. Yeah.
But you only have time for 1 museum. And that did not give you time to stay in any city very long. So which will it be? The Met or MoMA?
Met.
The Louvre or Centre Pompidou?
The Louvre.
Okay. And your last question, you still have 1 ringer left. Yes, she's going to go there. Boxers or briefs?
I like briefs, but I wear boxers.
And there you have it. That was the sprint round. Okay, so now we can slow down. This is the climb period of the ride.
Down? Oh, it's the climb.
It's the climb.
I thought it was
it's
the
a
cool
long.
down.
Imagine
I thought we were almost over.
We've got a long, slow road through the Alps.
Okay.
So these questions you can take a little time to ponder and respond. I'm not giving you multiple choice. So the first question. When we had lunch, I was surprised to learn that you have a passion for a particular genre of books and film. Can you tell us about this passion and share some of your favorites?
Well, I don't know if it's a passion, but I really do like horror films. And I like sometimes it's called the new horror that began in the 60s with Rosemary's Baby, Night of the Living Dead, Last House on the Left. And it's a departure from the more traditional horror movies with classic characters like Dracula or Frankenstein, and have more to do with the intrusion of the horrific elements in modern life. And one reason I like the new horror has to do with the fact that they're reflections, as most science fiction or horror movies are, reflections of contemporary life and concerns in society. For example, Night of the Living Dead, the original, was about the Vietnam War and racial tensions in large measure. And I love the more recent films like Hostel, about European American students who are backpackers, check into a youth hostel, are kidnapped, and are the subjects of wealthy people that pay money to have the experience of killing people. And it's an Eli Roth film. And
he looks so nice, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's very largely about the Iraq War and the horror of being captive and knowing that a horrible end will come to you. The protagonist survives, however. There's always, in the horror film, the convention of, it's called The Final Girl, the woman who's often a virgin who survives to the end and escapes the killer, or in this case, it was the final guy. Okay.
Fascinating. Betsy, can our next music curator be with about horror films? We could do a whole hour on. So isn't there a new Poltergeist movie out? Oh.
Yeah, I saw it on opening weekend. Okay. It just doesn't compare to the original. It's very 2015, very technologically advanced, but there's nothing like the original.
Yeah.
Steve Spielberg and Tobe Hooper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't waste your money on the new one. It's
a curiosity.
Okay, it's a curiosity. Okay. You're really getting a workout. I'm impressed. Okay.
Yeah,
a few more questions for the climb. So let's imagine you're writing your own horror screenplay, David Stark.
Uh-huh.
What work or works from the Columbus Museum of Art collection would feature prominently in this film?
there's a painting that I showed in conjunction with the Faces installation in the corridor. It's called Shako. I think I've got this spelled right. Tschokko. Is there a T in front?
No.
Just S-C-H-O-K-K-O.
You're thinking of a tchotchke. Yeah.
It's related to the word chocolate because she was a lady who liked chocolate. But she's a lady with green skin and an elaborate hat by the artist Jawlensky. And if I was to direct a horror film, that might be one of the signature images. The painting would come to life and have some kind of exercise, some kind of supernatural possession on somebody who looked at it. And by the way, this seems to be a contradiction or inappropriate to my discussion of the work, but it will be the name that we're going to call the restaurant in the new wing, Shako.
Great. So I think most people...
If I was supposed to say that, I don't know if that was supposed to be a scoop by our marketing department, so I apologize.
Oh, well, too late now. It's out.
By all this physical activity.
New cafe, name is Shako. But I imagine most people out here know that Shako work, and everyone is out there now imagining this horror film with Shako coming to life.
Sorry.
In the cafe at the Columbus Museum of Art.
Welcome to my nightmare. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, one more question for our climb, which you're climbing much faster than I am. So as I said at the beginning, I'm a big fan of imagination, so I'm going to ask you to use yours now, David Stark.
Okay.
If Nanette were so gracious to allow you to borrow one work of art from the Columbus Museum of Art to take to your home and display in your home somewhere, which would you choose?
Oh, we have a beautiful Thomas Cole landscape that I showed in conjunction with the American installation, the beautiful cascading falls outside of Tivoli in Italy. And I would treasure that painting that kind of sweeps you away into another world. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. I didn't expect that after all the horror.
Hey, I'm multidimensional.
You surprised me. Okay. We got to sprint to the finish. I think we're doing well on time, but we're going to sprint to beat it.
Wait a minute.
Last question.
Wait, before we forget.
Oh.
Blackhawks. All right, the Stanley Cup, Chicago. Yay. There's a citywide rally tomorrow, a parade and rally that's going to be centered kind of just geographically around the Art Institute. So I'm sorry that I'll miss it, but I'm excited for my former city and for the Hawks. Okay, go ahead.
No, I love that. I love that because my husband always assumes that those of us who work at art museums don't care about sports.
Well, I really don't, but I'm just interested in the spirit of Chicago. The city is consumed with this. So.
Yes,
okay,
it's consumed. Okay. Okay, for the sprint, your last question. And for your former professor sitting in your audience, close your ears. If you didn't pursue a degree in art history, what would you be doing now?
Hollywood screenwriter.
Oh, yes! 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 Okay. We're done.
Okay.
We're done. Awesome.
Good workout.
Good workout. What a sport. Let's all give David a thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.